Hi, I'm Allie Janes, in for Jamie Poisson. For 7 years now, the UK has been working on becoming, in their words, the safest place in the world to go online. Last Friday, it implemented a new set of rules from its Online Safety Act to keep children away from, quote, harmful and age-inappropriate content. This means age verification for all pornography websites. But that's not all. The big social media platforms and large search engines have to follow these rules too. They need to build guardrails that would prevent children from accessing porn or material that promotes suicide or self-harm or eating disorders, for example. This could again mean age checks, but it's also about getting companies to adjust their algorithm settings so that they're not recommending content that's considered harmful to kids. Not complying could lead to big costs. Companies could be fined £18 million, or 10% of their global revenues, whichever is higher. For many children's safety advocates, this is a step in the right direction. But others have major civil liberties and privacy concerns, and they see it as a slippery slope towards censorship. Sam Cole is here to walk through all of it with me. She's a journalist with 404 Media, and she's been covering how similar online safety rules have been playing out in 30 states across the US. She's also the host of the Pornhub Empire. It's a 4-part series on the biggest porn website in the world. You can find that in our CBC Understood feed. Hi, Sam. Thanks for being here.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Before we get to the controversies around this new legislation, talk to me about the case for it. Like, what is it meant to address?
So what it's meant to address, in theory, is harmful content that children might see on the internet. So things like violence, hateful content, abusive material, misogyny is a big one that this law's proponents of this law are trying to address. Things like bullying, and of course, adult content, so porn.
I'll just note that I saw a number cited in Sky News that a quarter of children's suicides in the UK are linked to content they've seen online, according to this 2019 study in the journal Psychological Medicine. So as I understand it, that's kind of part of what it's trying to address. But these rules have already, this was implemented last Friday. They've already been incredibly controversial in the UK. Earlier this week, UK Reform leader Nigel Farage was citing free speech concerns over it.
The Online Safety Act came into being this weekend, which begins to look, although state suppression of genuine free speech may be upon us already. And I'm going to ask.
And he was accused by the technology secretary, Peter Kyle, of being on the side of, quote, extreme pornographers.
We have people out there who are extreme pornographers, peddling hate, peddling violence. Nigel Farage is on their side. Make no mistake about it, if people like Jimmy Savile were alive today, he'd be perpetrating his crimes online. And Nigel Farage is saying that he's on their side.
I'm sorry.
There's a petition to repeal the rules that's got over 400,000 signatures already. So what do you make of the heated debate around the rules so far?
Yeah, the extreme pornographers comment, I think, really encapsulates what's going on with this conversation. It's really hard to criticize these sorts of laws that talk about children's safety and talk about saving the children from harmful content online, which is something that everyone is aligned on.
Mm-hmm.
Adult performers are aligned on this. The whole industry is aligned on this. But pushing back on these laws that require platforms to verify age often returns that kind of straw man, like, oh no, but you must be in the pocket of big porn, or you're part of this effort to show kids porn. It's a really difficult conversation to have. It's partially why a lot of these laws have passed so easily in the US, in red states especially, because saying, oh, we want to save kids from trafficking, we want to prevent kids from seeing harmful, immoral content, is something that everyone obviously can agree on, and it gets kind of pushed through very easily in a lot of cases.
The U.S. Senate today passed the Kids Online Safety Act by a vote of 91-3. If the bill passes the House, it'll mark the first time in 25 years that Congress has passed a bill aimed at better protecting children from dangers online.
But then, we see lots of unintended side effects, unintended consequences, and the fallout for adults and their freedom of expression, freedom of speech, censorship online gets affected as part of it, which is a really nuanced conversation. And it's hard to kind of encapsulate in a soundbite like a lot of the leaders in the UK and in Parliament seem to be trying to do.
Right. I mean, when we talk about, some of the unintended consequences, we're seeing already that people are finding ways around this already, right? Like virtual private network apps, VPNs, have gotten way more downloads in the UK since these rules kicked in last week. Tell me a bit about how people are already skirting the rules and what you think the impacts of that could be.
Yeah, I mean, VPNs are obviously a big one. That's one that most people, even kids, know how to use, where it will spoof the location of where you are. So you can say, oh, my IP address is based in the US, so I don't need to verify my age to access this content. People will use that just to directly see whatever they want to see, but then also people are just going to go to, and this is including minors, will go to more unmoderated, more harmful alternatives to the sites that are trying to comply with the law, sites that don't feel a responsibility to UK law. So people will end up being driven to these other sites that might not be hosting content with the consent of the people in them, are probably hosting like pirated content. So, even when adults are visiting the content, the people in the content aren't even getting paid for it. And then you have kids accessing it, which is obviously the point of the law is that kids can't see it. So you have kids going to these sites that might actually have unmoderated, unregulated content on that could be really harmful to see. So it's kind of pushing people to these fringes that are going to become more and more mainstream because of this law that's pushing them there. We also see people doing really kind of goofy stuff with trying to get around these laws. There was a story about people were using selfies of a video game character from Death Stranding, which is like a pretty realistic looking video game, and taking a photo in the game and using that as their selfie to upload, which is so funny. And it was
really
working.
Funny.
Yeah. And it's like, it's just that easy to kind of fool a lot of these systems. And it shouldn't be that easy, but that's kind of the Band-Aid that has been put over this as a solution, is like, we can scan people's faces and then that'll be a foolproof way of verifying age. And it's like, it's not.
I mean, talk to me more about how the age verification works, like, because this is, not only for websites like Pornhub, it's also for social media platforms. The last time we had you on the show, you talked about age verification for porn websites in the U.S. So can you walk us through how these age checking tools usually work?
Usually it's a third-party system. So a popular one is Yoti. There's also Persona, which is being used by Reddit now in the UK. How they work is you're in the UK, you hit a wall that says you must verify your age to continue to the content that you're trying to access. And usually it'll give you a couple options. It'll say, okay, now you can like go to this third-party site, and then they'll either scan your face with your webcam on your laptop or on your phone, take a selfie, and that's used as like biometric data that is supposed to verify whether or not you're an adult, which is interesting to me and feels like there's lots of room for error there. And if that fails, which I've tried lots of these systems, and often it fails, and often it's really glitchy and kind of a mess, then you can upload your ID instead. So it pushes you to that option. So you can take a picture of your driver's license or your passport and submit that for review. And then hopefully you get to enter the site. On some sites, if you're not logged in to the site, you won't, or if you're not logged into the third-party platform either, you'll have to do that every time. It's a lot to go through. It's a lot of hoops to jump through. For me as a legal adult to access something like my Blue Sky DMs, which is something you have to go through to access your direct messages on a social media platform, or Spotify has this now where they're showing pop-ups to people that says, if you want to access explicit content, you have to verify your age, you have to show your face, which is really privacy invasive and people just aren't going to want to do it.
Right. So, well, talk to me more about those privacy concerns and where the data is stored.
I mean, without getting too technical about it, I guess, you're kind of taking the word of the platform as hopefully their privacy protections. So you're taking their word for it that they're going to store it safely. You're just kind of hoping that this doesn't leak somewhere or get hacked. A really interesting example that was very timely, unfortunately, is last week this app called T, which is for women to like vet dates and like talk about the dates that they're going on and talk about men specifically and whether or not they're safe to go on dates. That app was hacked because it required you to show a selfie to somehow verify that you're a woman, which is already problematic. But all those selfies were then open to the public. They were exposed and people downloaded them. And thousands of pictures of women who didn't think they were going to have their selfies on the internet are now out there. And IDs also. So that app said, we're storing your data in a safe way, but obviously it didn't matter. It was still exposed. Ideally, like they're not being stored permanently or certainly for a long period. Some of the third-party platforms say like, oh, we store it for 7 days and then we delete it, which is still a long time.
So beyond the age checking part of the rules, another part of this is about adjusting algorithms. So the rules say that they must also be, quote, tamed and configured for children to avoid promoting harmful material. You know, and when we say harmful material, again, that could include things like content encouraging suicide or eating disorders. What could we see companies do here? Like, could you talk through an example for me?
Yeah. So when I hear that, I think that's a really interesting, overall, probably positive goal. I am not really confident, to put it mildly, that these platforms will do that or will be willing to do that or able at all to do it because we have been talking about and seeing sites like Instagram and Facebook feeding people really violent, harmful, disturbing content in their feeds all the time, even if they report it, even if they try to like get their algorithm to not show them that stuff, it still happens. They just know that that content gets engagement and it's something that they'll still do even if people don't like it. We see it with like AI slop. It's like people actively do not like that stuff and still get it in their feeds constantly. So I don't really know how it's going to be enforced or anything. It's like, how are these platforms going to, they don't even know how their algorithms work in a lot of cases. How are they going to be able to show Ofcom, oh, we're not showing children ED content, for example, eating disorder content, which is really slippery, really hard to catch if you're not knowing what you're looking for. It's not like they're going to be tagged not safe for work by the creator because they want it to be seen by as many people as possible. So I don't really know how that's going to work. It'll be interesting to see how that shakes out for sure.
Is there the possibility, though, that this law kind of provides some kind of push that they're not getting internally to moderate some of that? Like if there is a law to point to when like someone lodges a complaint to be like, I don't like this, I don't want it in my feed. And also our law is saying like, you can't be showing this to children or whatever. Like, is that a possibility that actually pushes them to actually take action on it?
That's the ideal that the authors of the law want, is that, you know, there's this external motivation from the government that's saying, if you don't comply with this, you're going to be fined, you know, 18 million pounds or 10% of your global revenue, which is a lot, whatever's higher, or go to jail. So like, I feel like that will be a powerful incentive to try to do this stuff. I just am not optimistic that it will be done in a way that like doesn't catch a ton of other non-infringing content that would be like, you know, education about eating disorders, for example, or news articles about war, which is violent, or even just like adult content that adults should be able to see without having to worry about it getting downranked in their feeds.
Just as another example of that, your colleague Emmanuel Myberg wrote recently about how UK users now have to post a selfie or a photo ID to view certain Reddit communities like Our Israel Crimes, which posts like some pretty graphic content, sometimes from Gaza, but also news articles and, non-graphic content about what's going on in Gaza right now. Can you tell me more about that and what the moderators have been saying about this?
Lots of these Reddit communities that are ostensibly about the news. So they're posting like The Guardian or BBC or whatever it is to talk about what's happening in Gaza and, even in like Ukraine or other types of like combat footage from Russia, things like that. So it's content that's definitely like quote unquote mature in terms of Reddit's rules because it is violent and it's talking about mature themes, but it's also news. It's something that adults should be able to freely be able to see without having to upload a selfie to look at a community talking about war crimes, which is something that people should be informed about without having barriers in the way. So the moderators for those subreddits are obviously really upset. One told us, we stand by the need for unfettered access to information and we continue to work to ensure these stories reach every corner of the internet. That was a moderator for Israel Crimes. It's definitely something that is falling to volunteer moderators in a lot of cases to tag their content so that it's within the terms that are now laid out in this law to say, oh, this is actually a mature subreddit. If they don't, they get shut down, they get banned from the platform, things like that. So they're pissed, but at the same time, it's like, it's one of those things that like, I don't know if the writers of this law and the supporters of it were thinking about news footage of war when they were considering what adults would and wouldn't be accessing as a result.
So on the other side of this, there are some child safety groups in the UK that say these rules actually don't go far enough. They want social media platforms to proactively search for harmful content, like stuff that promotes self-harm, and take it down. Some UK MPs have warned that these measures, for example, don't address misinformation and that they wouldn't have helped, for example, in a situation like the Southport riots that happened last summer, which were largely sparked by misinformation on social media that a man who had stabbed 3 little girls was an undocumented migrant. And so, what do you think of those kinds of arguments?
I think the argument that it doesn't go far enough probably comes from a good place as far as never wanting a child to have to experience seeing content that they shouldn't and then having psychological trauma from it. So I agree that it doesn't go far enough because it's not going far enough in the totally wrong direction. Like this law doesn't actually solve any of the problems that we're trying to address here as written because it's relying on platforms to do the right thing, which even faced with fines and scrutiny, they often find ways around that. And it's not addressing kind of the core problems of why this content exists in the first place or why kids are seeking it out, why they're able to find it, I think is a much deeper, more systemic societal issue. Trying to kind of paper over a problem using these kind of automated methods like age verification. And I think that's misguided in a lot of ways because kids end up getting around these things pretty easily. They'll end up on the internet anyway. I think kids should be able to see content that they want to like educate themselves on. Like they want to be able to see, sex education even on the internet in an age appropriate way. They should be able to see queer content and queer representation on the internet, which is really important for teenagers growing up these days to access representation like that. So I'm not like a maximalist. I'm not saying give your kids the internet and let them go. I'm kind of saying the opposite. We have the technology, we have the methods to control what kids see at the device level without infringing on adults' privacy and without infringing on kids' privacy even. It's like, if you give your kid a phone, put parental controls on it. Teach kids how to do that, what that means in school. Like, teach parents how to do that at an early stage in the kid's life. There are methods that aren't just this big blanket approach to age verification that are a lot more effective.
I think most of what you're talking about is kind of at an individual level, like at a parental level and at a literacy level. I'm wondering beyond that, like, do you see some kind of role for government to try to, regulate these companies and how they're using algorithms? Because, we know, firstly, the very documented harms. I mean, I'll just to give another example of sort of like an algorithm recommendation problem. According to a 2019 internal document from Meta, their algorithm system recommended 2 million accounts held by minors to groomers. So this is this wouldn't be encapsulated in this law because we're talking about content like what's being pushed to adults, but about children. So these were accounts that they had identified as being predatory towards children, and they were recommending these accounts to these so-called groomers. This is over the course of 3 months that year, and the company has said that it's been working since then to restrict recommendations for potentially suspicious adults. But beyond that, I mean, I'm just giving one example, but like those of us who have a ton of literacy about how to use the internet and the harms of it, that we still a lot of the time fall prey to like the addictiveness of the algorithms, to getting sucked down certain holes. Do you think there's some role for like some kind of regulation that tries to like hold these companies account rather than it just being on, individuals to try to make sure that they're educating their kids and put, as you're saying, the right controls? Is there something that governments should be doing to try to kind of curb the power of these companies?
It's something that we report on all the time about the ways that these platforms, that these big tech companies abuse the power that they have. They are able to collect so much data from us all the time so that their algorithms and their services are so much more appealing and so much more, able to get someone obsessed with it and go down a rabbit hole of like radicalization or violent content. I think definitely there should be some kind of guardrails from the government about what these companies can do as far as getting people hooked on their platforms. But at the same time, it's like these companies are extremely motivated by profit. So I think that they would find ways around them no matter what. And kids are a pretty valuable user base for these platforms. It's like if you can get a kid really loyal to Instagram, for example, or TikTok or whatever, you can keep that user for life in some cases and advertise to them infinitely and once they're adults. And we've seen it happen, and I could see it continuing to happen, where big tech is just lobbying constantly against that kind of regulation because they know that it would kneecap a lot of their profit and a lot of their revenue. So yeah, I mean, what that would look like, I think, would have to be so extremely nuanced as to not affect the rest of the content and the speech that's happening on these platforms. I would hope that if governments did bring that sort of thing to the table, that they would include sex workers and educators and experts in the field who aren't just Save the Children anti-trafficking groups, which is usually who gets brought to these conversations. I would hope that a lot of the stakeholders involved would be able to contribute because they have a lot of knowledge about how to do this stuff.
All right, well, we will have to leave it there. Thank you so much for this, Sam.
Yeah, thank you so much. This is such a nuanced conversation, so I'm glad that you guys are having it.
I'm glad that you're having it with us. All right, that is all for today. Thank you so much for listening to Front Burner. I'm Allie Janes, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.